Ready. Good evening. My name is Deidre Butler, and I'm the director of the Zelikovitz Center for Jewish Studies. On behalf of Carleton University, I'd like to welcome you to our program tonight in honor of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Our program, entitled Lost Memory, Forgotten Lessons, Holocaust Education, and the Challenge of Anti-Semitism Today, begins with a gift to bring together two universities, Carleton University and Université d'Ottawa. This gift of scholarship from the Israeli Embassy to all of our students, instructors, and researchers stands against the international tide of willful forgetting of the Holocaust through Holocaust denial, minimization, and distortion, and calls us to never forget the victims or the trauma of the survivors. It also calls us to interrogate historical anti-Semitism and to critically resist insidious, shifting, evolving forms of anti-Semitism in Canada and around the world. It is my pleasure to serve as your MC for tonight's program, and I will open our program by warmly welcoming Mr. Ohad Keinar, Chargé d'Affaires and Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of Israel in Canada.
Thank you, Deidre. Esteemed university faculty, members of the Zelikovitz Center, participants of the VERA Jewish Canadian Studies program, and our dear participants. The Israeli Embassy is honored to participate in this commemorative event, which is jointly held by Canada's capital universities, U Ottawa and Carleton U. Commemorating the Holocaust is not a task to be placed solely at the door of Jewish communities, and neither should it be an Israeli endeavor. As Jews, we recount our stories and our dead more intimately than required by an International Day of Decree. Ours is an identity forged in the furnaces of Auschwitz, just as it is in our tradition, religion, and 3,500-year-old heritage. We don't wait until high school to speak with our children about why grandma hides food under the mattress. We don't wait to speak about why grandpa rarely talks about the past and has trouble staying in cramped spaces. We don't wait to explain why there are crumpled black and white photos of families before families in some living rooms, or why so many candles are lit for children long gone. The International Day of Remembrance is set for the 27th of January, the historic day of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. This day was declared to educate nations on what happened and what can never happen again. But I use that term with foreboding. Too quickly do people use the phrase never again, and too recklessly. Can any of us really promise never again? Are the events manifesting in our time before our very eyes not an echo to those of the past? Do any of us truly believe that Nazis just materialized out of thin air in 1939 and disappeared again in 1945? Were the numerous clauses of 1922 not the foundation of the Nuremberg laws of 1935? Was the anti-Jewish boycott of 1933 not the precursor for Kristallnacht of 1938? Can any of us calmly say never again 3 weeks after seeing Nazis strutting around the US Capitol? Can we say so less than 2 weeks after the desecration of the Montreal synagogue with Nazi swastikas? Can we say so less than a year after the National Holocaust Memorial of Canada was vandalized? The vigilance required on this day demands that we be careful in these proclamations. It requires us to actively work towards ensuring that, again, does not happen in our lifetimes. To that end, we, the Embassy, are proud to present both universities with a donation of essential reading materials curated by the university libraries. This is a modest effort to further the purpose of the day. As the late Elie Wiesel said in his acceptance speech of 1986 Nobel Peace Prize, I remember a young Jewish boy who discovered the kingdom of night. He asked his father, "Can this be true? This is the 20th century, not the Middle Ages. Who would allow such crimes to be committed? How could the world remain silent?" And now that boy is turning to me. "Tell me," he asks, "what have you done with my future? What have you done with your life?" And I tell him that I've tried to keep memory alive, that I've tried to fight those who would forget, because if we forget, we are guilty, we are accomplices. Again, I thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Mr. Keinar, for this timely and welcome gift. Please welcome President Benoit Antoine Bacon, Carleton University.
Thank you very much, Deidre. And I want to start by thanking Mr. Keinar for the remarks just now, and in particular, evoking the words of the great Elie Wiesel, who by happenstance was receiving an honorary degree the day I received my own PhD from the University of Montreal. And it was 1999, and he addressed the whole assistants, asking the assembled doctorants to make sure to always remember and not to recreate the horrors of the 20th century. I'll never forget it. Thank you for that, and thank you for the wonderful gift today. Bonsoir tout le monde. Bienvenue. It's a real pleasure to be with everyone tonight for this very important event. And for those of us from Carleton University, I would like to start by acknowledging and respecting the Algonquin people, the traditional custodian on the land on which the university campus is situated. Sincere thanks to the co-hosts, the Israeli Embassy, of course, Hillel, Ottawa, Carleton and the Zelikovitz Center, and the University of Ottawa and the Viret Jewish program. Thank you very much for bringing us together today. We'd all prefer to be in person. I think that goes without saying, but it's so important to continue to build those links, even in the virtual environment, especially when it comes to underlining important days and events like today. As you well know, International Holocaust Remembrance Day is so important to come together to honor the lives of the millions of victims, to remember these atrocities in the hope that they're never repeated. And I agree with my predecessor on the stage. The hope, not the certainty. It's a day to come together as a community to say no to prejudice, to say no to anti-Semitism and other forms of racism, to say no to hatred, to stand for inclusivity, for our common shared humanity. It's especially important that we do so in today's politically divisive climate. Carleton's a diverse community that strives for inclusion always. That's at the core of our new strategic plan. Our new EDI action plan provides a clear roadmap towards these objectives. We can always do better. It's our shared responsibility, and we must always be vigilant. We're very proud at Carleton to contribute to preserving and furthering Jewish knowledge and culture through research, scholarship, education. We have more than 25 faculty members that conduct research in the field of Jewish studies, including the study of Israel in collaboration with Israeli partners. We also offer a Jewish studies minor. And in normal times, unfortunately not these days, but in normal times, we offer trips to Israel for groups of undergraduate and graduate students. And of course, the Zelikovitz Center does tremendous work supporting education, research about Jewish culture, promotes scholarly inquiry into all aspects of the Jewish experience, and it develops incredible educational programs and activity to promote a deeper understanding of the history and legacy of the Holocaust. And I do want to thank our director, Deidre Butler, for all the great work in this area. In closing, we're truly thankful to the Israeli Embassy for a really generous donation earmarked for books related to the Holocaust and other Jewish-related topics. That is so important. It will benefit our researchers and students today. But the way books work, they will benefit generations of students and professors, some of them not born yet. And as we move forward into the future, it becomes easier and easier to forget the past. And that's why we must always remember, and access to these resources will be invaluable to our community. Thank you very much. I'm confident to end on a note of optimism, which is not always easy this day, that if we work together in open dialogue, we can usher in the future that's built on inclusivity, not prejudice and hate, on empathy and compassion, where differences are celebrated and not feared. Thanks everyone on behalf of the entire Carleton community for being here tonight. Merci beaucoup et bonne soirée. I wish you all a very good evening.
Thank you, President Bacon. Veuillez s'il vous plaît accueillir Président Jacques Frémont, Université d'Ottawa.
My phone is ringing at this very point in time. So that's a good sense of timing. Merci beaucoup, Professeur Butler. C'est un grand honneur pour moi d'être avec vous ce soir pour cette importante session sur l'éducation de l'Holocauste et le défi continu de l'antisémitisme. I want to begin and to add my voice to that of Benoit Antoine by acknowledging with gratitude the recent gift of Holocaust education materials made to the University of Ottawa by the Israeli Embassy. Thank you very much. These new resources will be added to our already substantial library of materials about the Holocaust and will be used by students from around the world for years to come. So thank you so much for that generous donation. We really appreciate it. Holocaust education, we will agree, is a vital aspect of the ongoing struggle against anti-Semitism today. Together, we must ensure that every young person understands, as has just been mentioned, and repeats the words, never again. And the again word, I agree, is extremely important. Let me reaffirm that racism and discrimination, and it is, I joined Benoit Antoine Bacon and our brothers and sisters from Carleton University on that, racism and discrimination have no place in our university. Although we number 50,000, we are one community. We like to believe a welcome community that opposes and denounces racism, harassment, and discrimination of all kinds. Let us be clear. The fight against anti-Semitism must be a fight against the very idea of racism and against all forms of racial discrimination. For wherever the intolerant ideology of hate flourishes, we are all at risk of its spread. And I must say that reading the newspapers these days, listening to the media, fear is spreading. We are not in an easy position. I think the challenge is there, and the hate, racism is hidden everywhere. And I guess, and I hope not too much, anti-Semitism is also present in our societies. Reading the Montreal newspapers and looking at the media these last hours, we see that on the flip of the switch, it reappears again in all its horror. And I deplore that. In that context, we share a duty to speak out, to remember the atrocities of the past in order to eliminate such terrible events from our future. That is why we are here tonight, to learn, to share, and to say clearly and loudly, never again. Thank you very much.
Merci, Président Frémont. Please welcome Dean Pauline Rankin of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Carleton University.
I've just saved you, Deidre, from saying you're on mute. Hello and welcome. On behalf of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at Carleton University, I'm honored to participate in this evening's events, and thank you for the invitation. As the title of tonight's gathering, Lost Memory, Forgotten Lessons, reminds us, the perils of forgetting are with us always. Assaults on truth, unfortunately, are not new, but the dangerous toxicity that spreads from the combination of denying facts and distorting the past have come into even sharper focus in recent days. Once again, unfortunately, a new generation of students bears witness to the banality of evil that can take root in such toxicity. As we reflect on the responsibilities that universities must assume in supporting and sustaining Holocaust education and combating anti-Semitism, I'm reminded of French philosopher Paul Ricoeur's writings about the work involved in remembering. In his book, Memory, History, and Forgetting, Ricoeur wrote, and I quote, "It is not only the arduousness of the effort of memory that confers this unsettling character upon the relation, but the fear of having forgotten, of continuing to forget, of forgetting tomorrow to fulfill some task or other. For tomorrow, one must not forget to remember." Our role as educational institutions is to continue that arduous work of sustaining and safeguarding memories, and then catalyzing those memories into action to imagine and create societies that reject discrimination and embrace and defend diversity. Answering the urgent call to dismantle the pandemic of racism and hatred that afflicted us long before COVID requires collaboration and cooperation. As we recommit tonight to challenging anti-Semitism in its many evolving forms, I am grateful for the generosity of the Israeli Embassy, the leadership of the Zelikovitz Center of Jewish Studies and the VRED Jewish Canadian Studies program, and the collegiality of the University of Ottawa, with whom we share both the sacred burden and the opportunity of remembrance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Rankin. Please welcome Dean Key, Faculty of Arts, Ottawa University.
Thank you, Professor Butler. Good evening, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. En tant que doyen de la Faculté des Arts, c'est un plaisir pour moi de me joindre à vous ce soir en cette journée de souvenir et de recueillement. I also want to express my gratitude to Mr. Ohad Kanar and the Embassy of Israel in Canada for their generosity to us in the Faculty of Arts in the University of Ottawa through this gift of materials with which we will remember the Holocaust. Thanks for this gift to our university, to our professors, and to our students, the present and the future. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to collaborate with you. We have enjoyed close ties with the Embassy of Israel. Just a few years ago, I was working with the Embassy and the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities, along with the Royal Society of Canada. And we spent several days together at the Academy in Albert Einstein Square in Jerusalem. And on this cold January day, when I can't be with you in Ottawa on the Carleton campus or at the Embassy or the University of Ottawa campus, I wish I was there. But here we are, and it's good to be together, even at a distance. The close relationship between the faculty of the university and the Embassy of Israel is also evident in the VRED Jewish Canadian Studies program at the Faculty of Arts, which holds a very special place in the faculty and at the University of Ottawa. The program's home to leading scholars in the fields of history, literature, cinema, Holocaust studies, cultural studies, and many other disciplines. And it's this wonderful place where people come together with different perspectives to create new knowledge and to help students learn. Their tireless and important work allows our students to fully appreciate the richness of this cultural heritage in the past and present, to engage with new understanding and new ways of remembering. We're grateful to the program. We're grateful to the Embassy for their contribution to our multidisciplinary environment. Let me especially mention Emma Tessie, who is the coordinator of the VRED program for Jewish Canadian Studies, and thank him for his remarkable leadership, most especially at this difficult time when leading a program of this nature at a distance isn't easy. I'm very much looking forward to this evening discussion and the film Glass Negatives and learning more about it, hearing more about it. The Jerusalem conference I was telling you about was about history, was about how we remember. And as an historian, a story like this one is a precious gift. There's great anguish here, but there's also hope. Thanks to these glass negatives, the stories of Lublin and its inhabitants will remain very much alive in our memory, in our thinking, in our work to make the world a better place. I wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Key. It is now my distinct pleasure to share these recorded remarks from the Honorable Professor Erwin Kotler, Canada's Special Envoy on Preserving Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Antisemitism.
Chargé d'Affaires Kenan, University Presidents Bacon and Fremont, chers amis, friends. May I begin by commending the Israeli Embassy for its contribution to both the University of Ottawa and Carleton University of Holocaust materials for their respective libraries. This contribution is as timely as it is necessary. As it happens, we meet at an important moment of remembrance and reminder, of witness, and even of warning. We meet on the 76th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp, the most brutal extermination camp of the 20th century. 1.3 million people were deported to the death camp Auschwitz. 1.1 million of them were Jews. Let there be no mistake about it. Jews were murdered at Auschwitz because of anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism did not die at Auschwitz. It remains the bloodied canary in the global mineshaft of evil today. And as we've learned only too painfully and too well, that while it begins with Jews, it doesn't end with Jews. But while the Holocaust is a paradigm for radical evil, and anti-Semitism a paradigm for radical hate, Auschwitz is the evil manifestation of both. Yet recent studies have shown that young people, United States and Canada, some 50% of young people have never even heard of the death camp Auschwitz or can't even name one death camp. In other words, we are finding that there is regrettably an appalling ignorance about the Holocaust, which can end up incentivizing the dangers of anti-Semitism. And so the importance of the contributions to Holocaust education that are being made this evening. As well, this contribution will help to educate us about what the Stockholm Declaration has called the unprecedented horrors of the Holocaust and its universal lessons for our time. Let me summarize some of those lessons in a series of one-liners. This is an informed audience, and I trust that I can do so in a rather graphic fashion. First is the danger of forgetting and the imperative of remembrance, le devoir de mémoire. Second is that the mass murder of 6 million Jews and millions of non-Jews is not a matter of abstract statistics. As we say at such moments of remembrance, that onto each person there is a name. Each person is an identity. Each person is a universe. As our sages tell us, if you save a single person, it is as if you have saved an entire universe. Just as if you kill a single person, it is as you have killed an entire universe. And so we are each, wherever we are, the guarantors of each other's destiny. The third danger, and I witnessed this when I visited the death camp Auschwitz, was the demonization of the Jew. The demonization of the Jew as the embodiment of all evil, as prologue and justification for the mass murder of the Jews. As the Supreme Court of Canada put it so well, the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chamber, said the court. It began with words. These are the chilling facts of history. These, as the court put it, are the catastrophic effects of racism. And we have as well, accompanying this, the dangers of Holocaust denial and distortion, of disinformation that feeds the ignorance. And so our responsibility to educate. And so once again, the importance of this contribution this evening. The danger also of silence in the face of evil, our responsibility always to speak up and stand up and shatter the silence. The next lesson, and one that is a recurring one, tragically, even as we meet, is the danger of indifference and inaction in the face of mass atrocity and genocide. What makes the Holocaust and the genocides that followed, such as the genocide of the Tutsis in Rwanda or in Darfur, or more recently, as we meet, acts constitutive of genocide targeting the Uyghurs in Xinjiang region of China? What makes all these genocides so unspeakable are not only the horrors of the genocides themselves, though that would be bad enough. What makes them so unspeakable is that they were preventable. Nobody could say we did not know. We knew, but we did not act. And even now, we are not acting in the case of the genocide of the Uyghurs in China. And we have also the dangers of la trahison des clercs, the betrayal of the elites. Let us not forget that the Nuremberg crimes were the crimes of the Nuremberg elites. And the dangers of impunity, of the responsibility to bring war criminals and human rights violators to justice. And may I close by saying a word about Holocaust survivors and rescuers. For the Holocaust survivors endured the worst of inhumanity, but somehow they found in the resources of their own humanity the ability to go on, to rebuild their lives, to start families, and to make contributions to whatever community and country they became a part of. And we here in Canada, of course, have been the beneficiaries of the Holocaust survivor community here in Canada. And we remember also the rescuers this evening, like Raoul Wallenberg. And we just concluded commemorating Raoul Wallenberg Day in memory of and in tribute to Canada's first honorary citizen, the Swedish diplomat Raoul Wallenberg, who demonstrated how one person with the compassion to care and the courage to act can confront evil, prevail, and transform history. An inspirational lesson for all of us at any time. And so the words that frame our gathering this evening, may this be not only an act of remembrance, which it is, but may it be also a remembrance to act in the pursuit of justice and our common humanity. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our distinguished guests for joining us tonight and their strong voices. We now turn to the second half of this evening's program, the panel discussion of the film, Glass Negatives. This film is presented by the Zelikovitz Center for Jewish Studies and our partner, the VERED Jewish Canadian Studies program. We have both ensured that this film will be available to our students after tonight's event by contributing the streaming rights to our respective libraries. I hope that you have all had a chance to view the documentary Glass Negatives. In case some of you have not, we will share a 4-minute trailer before our discussion.
when I started volunteering for Brahma and guiding groups in the exhibition. So I tell them, in Lublin in 2012, there was this glass negative collection found in an attic of a building. And they're like amazed, and you have to see their faces like really shining, because that's a crazy story from movies. And I tell this story again and again and again. And at some point I say, wow, it is an amazing story. I have to do something with it. It's not just that I tell this story. I have to ask some questions. I have to realize, what is this collection? What did anyone ever research it? Do we know who's the photographer? Do we know who are these people? So many questions. And when I started asking those questions, I found out that most of them don't really have answers.
I will now invite my colleague, Professor Hernan Tesler-Mabe, coordinator of the VERED Jewish Canadian Studies program at the University of Ottawa, to introduce our panel. Welcome, Hernan.
Thank you very much, Deidre, and good evening. On behalf of the VERED Jewish Canadian Studies program at the University of Ottawa, I would like to also welcome you all to this evening's event to commemorate International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I hope you don't mind as I make a few preliminary comments and then introduce our co-panelists. First, we extend a special welcome to our esteemed guests, the Chargé d'Affaires at the Embassy of Israel in Canada, Ohad Kainer, University of Ottawa President Jacques Fremont, Carleton University President Benoit Antoine Bacon, Dean of the Faculty of Arts at the University of Ottawa Kevin Key, Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at Carleton University, Pauline Rankin. Welcome to you all. We are honored that you have joined us this evening and are deeply moved by your words of support for Holocaust education and your commitment to fighting anti-Semitism and racism in all its forms. I also want to add that I'm humbled and hopeful humbled by the presence of colleagues that I see here, as well as friends, family, and even students who have joined us this evening. Thank you also to you all for joining us. And before we launch into the next part of our program, I also wanted to expressly thank our friends at the Embassy of Israel in Canada for their donation. Their generous gift to the University of Ottawa will enrich, as we all know, our collection of Holocaust education resources and help us better understand the Holocaust and the importance of its remembrance. We would also like to thank our friends and colleagues at the Zelikovitz Center at Carleton University. I'm speaking to you, Deidre, and your friends there as well, for partnering with us in this important endeavor. This evening's event and the poignant film Glass Negatives that we just saw a trailer for represents an opportunity for us to immerse ourselves in a now distant Jewish world that was devastated by the Holocaust. And it pains me to even say that. But it is also a moment to mindfully reflect upon the need to remain vigilant against the rise of intolerance and extremism that imperils us all. And so we gather here this evening to simultaneously mourn what was lost and to reaffirm our commitment to interrogate the Holocaust so that we never lose sight of its meaning. With these words, let me move on now to the panel discussion on Holocaust education and the dangers of anti-Semitism today. Our panelists this evening include the creators of Glass Negatives, who are joining us from very far away, Director Jan Borowiec and researcher Tal Schwartz, as well as Orly Ehrlich, consul for the Embassy of Israel in Canada and a third-generation Holocaust survivor. My Carleton colleague, Professor Deidre Butler, and I will also be participating in the panel as scholars who research and teach about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, and we will moderate the discussion. Each of the guests now on the panel will say a few words, then we will open up the floor to discussion and questions. And I begin with Orly. If you can say a few words, we'd love to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for this important evening. I'm very honored to be here. I'm a third generation of Holocaust survivors, and it's important to me to tell you a little bit about my family story. I'll try to keep it short. First of all, I wanted to tell you that from my mother's side, my grandparents, David and Pearl Cohen-Kagan-Karolinsky of blessed memory, they lived before the war in Poland, near the city of Pinsk. Today it is a part of Belarus. When war broke out in September 1939, on the high holiday of Yom Kippur, the Soviet army occupied this area. In June 1941, the Soviets deported many families from Yanov to Siberia. My great-grandmother, Esther Karolinsky, was among those deported together with her daughters, Pearl, my grandmother, Batya, and her son, Soli. Soli was drafted at the age of 17 to the Red Army and never returned. In June 1941, the Germans captured the Yanov area from the Russians. That August, the German soldiers rounded up 420 men to go to work in the forest. That group of workers were shot in the forest. Among them, Joseph and Zalman Cohen-Kagan, my grandfather's brother. In April 1942, all remaining Jews were forced into the local ghetto, and in September of that year, the ghetto was to be destroyed. The Jewish residents of the ghetto hid in a bunker and other hiding place, but to no avail. The Germans used fire and indiscriminate bombs to kill everyone that was hiding. Among those killed were my grandfather's entire family and my grandma Pearl's brother. By chance, my grandfather was made to stay at the leather factory where he was working on the day of the ghetto annihilation. From there, he escaped to the forest and joined a group of partisans. Between them was Aaron Arl Karolinsky, my grandma Pearl's brother. They fought with the partisans against the German, bombing trail rails and police stations until the end of the war. There's a movie called Defiance that was published 2008 about the partisan in that area. It's very interesting and it shows that story. My grandpa, David, met my grandma Pearl at a displaced person camp in Munich after the war. They got married and my mother was born in that camp in Munich. In 1950, they moved to Israel. My name is Orly Aharona, in the memory of Aaron Arl Karolinsky, my grandma Pearl's brother. And my son's name is Eyal David, and he's named after my grandfather, David. From my father's side, my grandfather, Chaim of blessed memory, and my grandma, Rosalia, who is 96 old today. And I wish her all the best. And her last name is Neubauer, and the name before the marriage was Dutch. Before the war, both my grandparents lived in southern Czechoslovakia under Hungarian control. In January 1944, the German army occupied Hungary and started the transfer of Jews to concentration camps. My grandfather Chaim was arrested in Hungary for assisting in smuggling Jews to southern Slovakia, which was thought to be safer. He was then sent to 3 different concentration camps, passing through Mauthausen and ending up in Dachau. There he worked in slave labor and contracted typhus. He overcame and was liberated by the American army from Dachau camp. My grandmother Rosalia was taken from her village in June 1944 and sent by train to Auschwitz concentration camp. Her father Emil was sent straight away to the gas chambers in Auschwitz. She was there with her mother Elizabeth and her sister Hannah. They endured 3 selections overseen by Dr. Mengele. Her mother Elizabeth died in Auschwitz, while Rosalia, my grandmother, and her sister Hannah survived and were liberated at the end of the war. Today, my grandmother and her sister Hannah lived side by side in a moshav in Israel named Batzra. My grandmother Rosalia, she's 96 years old and has 15 grandchildren. And her sister Hannah, who is 94, has 12 grandchildren. So, and this day, my grandmother Rosalia, who was only 20 years old when she was liberated 76 years ago from the Auschwitz camp, had to start her life from nothing, but she overcome. And I think we should never, never forget and always remember their stories. Thank you again.
Thank you, Orly, for that deeply personal sharing, and we very much appreciate it, and it very much reminds us of how personal this is for so many families. So thank you once again. We now turn to Jan Borowiec. Jan will say a few words, presumably about his film, as he joins us from Poland. So welcome, Jan.
Good evening. Thank you for your invitation. It's an honor to be here with you. And what can I tell? I'm a Polish film director and a lawyer. Now I'm in Warsaw, but I came from Lublin. Lublin is my hometown. And I think that's why one of the reasons why I decided to make film about Lubliners and about this unique discovery of glass negative collection. And I'm open for your questions, so feel free to ask me about it. And there is Tal with us also, a main character of the film.
Thank you, Jan. We will have hopefully a million questions. If not, I will have a million questions for you, certainly. Thank you. And we now move to Tal Schwartz, who is a researcher, obviously, who is deeply involved in this film, and she will say a few words also. Thank you, Tal, please.
Hi, and good evening, everybody. And as Jan said, it's really great to be here with you in this evening or night, depends where you are, but late night for us. You said that I'm a researcher, and on this film or on this project, I am a researcher, but my origin is that I'm a photographer. So that's my personal connection to this glass negative collection as a photographer myself. And I think this is something that touched me very much. It is a story that goes with me from the first moment I came to Poland in 2013 and until today. And I met Jan in Lublin. Maybe it's another topic for a whole different story, but I found myself living in Poland. I'm from Israel, if I didn't say that. I lived in Lublin for 2 years almost. This is where we crossed paths with Jan and made this movie. And I think, well, lots of interesting things to talk about, I guess. But we'll leave this for the questions and discussion. So thank you again.
Thank you, Tal, very much. So now what we'll do, I guess, is open the floor up. If there are any questions that you would like to pose for the panel, we can speak to one another as well. I don't know if Deidre would like to step in at this point and sort of help direct traffic a little bit.
Actually, I'm trying to track the questions right now myself. So perhaps, Hernan, if any of our panelists have a question or you do, you could get us started.
I'll start. Thank you very much. I'll take this opportunity very gladly. Why this project, Jan? How did you become alerted to this particular collection of glass negatives? What were the circumstances surrounding this? And what drew you to it?
Okay, you know, the story, how I find out about the collection, it's maybe not very spectacular. I read an article in a newspaper about this unique discovery, but more interesting, I think, was the moment when I get into the conclusion that the building where a collection was hidden, it's I think 100 meters in straight line from the building where I lived that time. And finally, when I saw the pictures and people depicted on them with their joys and sorrows, moods, with the whole atmosphere of the pictures, I realized that they are my neighbors. They could be, their children could be my friends, but it's not possible because of the war and of the Holocaust. And I thought that it's this process in my mind very natural and touching. It's very good beginning to start thinking about how to tell this story to other people. So this is the very beginning of the project.
Thank you, Jan.
So if you don't mind, I just want to let everyone know that you can type questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. So if you look at the very bottom of your screen, and I'm keeping an eye on things, we do want the audience to have a chance to ask questions. And I'll pass it back to you, Hernan, and perhaps someone in the panel has a question.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have one first question. Were the glass negatives found in 2010 or 2012?
I think that's a question to Tal.
That was 2012.
2012.
Thank you.
Great. Are there, when these images were found, I mean, what was the circumstance? Was it just simply that the building was being renovated and it just was lying there, or?
I know that during renovation of the building, the workers discovered a wall that shouldn't be that shouldn't be in that building because of the plans. And when they destroyed, they realized that inside there is a shelter with around 3,000 glass negatives. And so Tal, please help me, because Tal became a part of the project before I started making film, and so maybe you know more details. But it was for sure a group of workers, and discovered the shelter.
Yes, it was the construction workers together with the architect, Krzysztof Janus. And he is a very knowledgeable man, so he understood what kind of a huge discovery he has in his hands. And they collected those glass negatives, they cleaned them, they scanned them. So they really understood this is a very special finding, something you don't find at every time. Because also, as Jan said, there was some kind of a wall or a barricade hiding those glass negatives. And in the past, in the 50s, there were all kinds of actions of cleaning attics in Poland to avoid different diseases and so on. So many objects, Jewish objects hidden in attics, were just destroyed, ruined in the 50s in all those actions. So it's very rare today to find something like that at all.
Moreover, it was like under the roof. So you can imagine that in winter it was extremely cold, and in summer it was extremely hot. So not only the fact that they were cleaning buildings, but it's really unique. It's a treasure. It's just a treasure that it survived.
Wonderful, thank you. Deidre.
So we have a couple of questions for Tal, and I'm going to start with kind of the quick questions and then some more complicated ones. So first of all, were many of the negatives broken, and were they all able to be restored?
So many of them were broken, like a few hundreds. Those that were not broken, some of them, you know, the emulsion on the glass is sometimes destroyed because of the hard conditions, you know, so the time that passed. So sometimes we have, I don't know, about a few dozens of negatives that you cannot see anything on them, like, but, you know, just black emulsion. So that also we have in the collection, and I think this is also very special.
Thank you. So as a professor, I privilege all questions from students. So Melissa, who's a grad student at U Ottawa, wonders what your process was, Tal, to find the individuals that were in the pictures. And this was actually my question too, as well as the man whose father knew the photographer. And are you still conducting research of the people who are in these images?
I must say that I was not the one to conduct the research of finding the people in the photographs. So what I think is important to know is that this glass negative collection today is a part of a very special institution in Lublin called the Grodzka Gate. And this institution is a cultural institution funded by the city. And it's dealing with the multicultural past of Lublin, and mostly the Jewish past of Lublin, through art and theater. And this is a unique institution. I really cannot describe it, because it's some kind of a mixture between a theater and a museum and an archive and I don't know, publishing house, and a lot of amazing work done there. And this collection is part of the institution. I think I lost myself in the question. I'm sorry.
No, they were asking about process. So maybe you could tell us a bit about
yeah, I can say so that the first research about this collection was done in this institution. So they published it online, and they published it in the newspaper, like Jan saw it, and they were looking for people from the photos. But as you can understand, most of the people in the photographs are Jews, and most of them probably did not survive. So it was very hard to find someone from those photos, and some people were found, but I think overall only 9 people out of 3,000 photographs. So about 10,000 faces. Yeah, so just imagine the proportions. So that's not a research I did. The research I did was, well, the process was first to archive this collection, because it was not, like, it was in the archive, but there was no database saying like, okay, let's see what's in those photos. So that was my first step in this process. So for months, just going through the collection, photo by photo, and trying to put tags on it, and which is also very hard when you don't know that your only historical resource is actually a visual one, and it's a silent one, right? So you have to really think, because everything you say has meaning, right? If you say, I don't know, a family, how do you know that? If you say a couple, are you sure they are a couple? Maybe they are a brother and sister. Like, what are the things that are absolutely sure that you can put a tag on, you know? Like Jewish, right? No, it's not that obvious, right? How do I decide that someone is Jewish in a photograph? Like, well, if they have, like, you know, the traditional clothes or pairs or something, then I can say. Or maybe if I can recognize that it's in an event of opening the yeshiva, then I know these are Jews. But other than that, how can I be sure that people I'm looking at are actually Jews? So you have to be very careful with that as well. And that's part of the process. And I don't know, after that, it was just, the question of like, okay, who's the photographer? Let's try to find out that. And so you can see it in the movie, I guess.
So we have a few more questions actually about the photographer, wondering whether it's fair to assume that the photographer ultimately perished during the war, or is there any evidence that he survived? Another question asks, are we certain that they're all by one photographer? And what are the current findings that point to the photographer Abraham Zilberberg?
So maybe Jan can join me on that. But my first sentence would be, we're not certain of anything. And I think this is something to understand and to think about when definitely we're dealing with a topic in a time like the war and the Holocaust. We're not certain of anything. So there was a question about the photographer, that his identity, he perished, what happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than one photographer. I personally believe it's more than one photographer. Yeah, definitely, but I cannot prove anything, right? What we can say is that there are definitely a few photographs found in the collection that appears in the album of the yeshiva. And over there, they are it's written that it was taken by Warman from Lublin. So maybe Warman is our photographer. On the other hand, Zilberberg, Abraham Zilberberg is listed as a photographer in the 40s in lists made by the Germans, that he lived in that building on Rieneck number 4. Do we have any other evidence connecting him to the collection? No. But he is the only photographer listed in that building. So
exactly. That was the first question, who was an author, and but I hope the viewers, you and like us, during the process, we realized that the answer, what was the name of the author, is not the most important answer, because if the question gives, the question is an answer, I feel sometimes when I think about the solution of the investigation that Tal told this in the film, that it's a void, and this sometimes less is more. We can understand what happened because we cannot find the identity of an author, and I think it's more important, and it shows the meaning of the film. But for sure, on the very beginning, that was the engine of the film, like the investigation. And I hope it works as an investigation film, and until there is a meeting with Lubliners in Israel.
Thank you. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time. I know it's quite late for you in Poland and other people have other obligations. So I just want to try and bring together a few more of the questions. There are a few questions, Tal, about you and your identity. So, and one of them is from a student, so from my student, so I have to ask. So he wanted to know about how this experience of working on this project really affected your sense of identity. And that connects to another question from another of our guests who wanted to know more about your connection to the project, how you became involved, and how this all impacted you.
Okay, so we'll start with the second one, because I found myself living in Poland, which is something quite unusual, I guess. As I said, I'm a photographer, and I traveled through Poland because it interested me. Both my grandparents from my father's side are survivors, and I just thought at some point, in a different world, I could have been born there. What is this place? How does it feel? How does it look? Who are the people there? And it took me on a journey. And in that journey, I made it to Lublin, just because I heard the name and I thought it's interesting to check what's there. And I ran into this institution that I told you about, the Grodzka Gate institution. And over there, I was really amazed by their approach to history and how to tell it, and how involved they were and how committed they were to telling the Jewish history of their city. And that was what caught me and what brought me there. And when they invited me to be a volunteer in the center, I immediately said yes. Okay, just coming to live in Poland with you and work with you, because their work is, I cannot emphasize enough how amazing it is. And that's what brought me there. And in the center, I ran into the collection. It's part of the exhibition. And as I said in the movie, I was telling this story over and over and over again until something really, I don't know, just rang a bell or something like that. I don't know. About identity, I'm not sure I'm very comfortable with that term, or with this like approach of talking about an identity, because it's never one thing, right? It's like I cannot really specify what is my identity or how it affected me. I can say that it definitely affected me as a human being. This whole experience of living in Poland, connecting more to my Polish roots, Polish Jewish roots, and I think, also it's an experience of being an immigrant, which is something that my parents and grandparents did, and suddenly I could connect it from a different side. So it teaches you a lot about yourself and about life. So I don't know if it answers the question. It does.
Thank you. I think it does. So as to wrap up, I'm just going to pull together a few questions we have from the audience that are really connecting this story with what's happening in Poland today, and the kind of contemporary Polish responses to the Holocaust and thinking about its own history. And so I have a question for Jan, which is that you worked with a lawyer. So this question asks about if the law practice ties into the work in terms of promoting Holocaust remembrance and the fight against anti-Semitism. And I'll just give you the other piece of the question too, so perhaps you both could answer this, is that this audience member has an awareness that sometimes the local population is resentful of Jewish artifacts that recall the pre-war period. And what was the public response to the collection and researchers reaching out to the public? So maybe we could start with the lawyer and then have a sense of what the public response was.
I'm sorry, but I don't understand the first part of the question.
The lawyer you worked with, was he working on other Jewish causes about remembering the Holocaust or anti-Semitism, or was it just?
Or are you a lawyer?
I'm a lawyer.
He's a lawyer. That's what I thought too.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought
it's okay.
The question was confusing.
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer and a filmmaker. That's my choice. But what can I tell? I'm an example of inhabitant of Lublin and the Polish citizen, and for me this story was it was very natural to start the project about this discovery of glass negatives. And my passion is to tell a story, and especially this story is one of the most important stories to tell. It's a story about my neighbors, about my city, my heritage, and about also it shows what man is capable of, and we can never forget about it. And what was the most important and really unique during the process, meetings with Lubliners, with survivors from that live right now in Israel. And their stories about my city, the same. One of them graduate from the same school. And so another lived in the same building. Her uncle lived in the same apartment where I live right now. So it's a story about our world, our common world, and it was really very natural for me when I get information about this this discovery to just to ask some questions. And when I met Tal, we decided like to go to this journey together. And what was the second part of the question?
So this is the more broad question. So how did people respond to all of this? How did they respond to the research that was done, the collection? How did they respond to your film? We hear about Poland and Canada, and we want to know.
Right now, film is on festivals. It has a premiere on the biggest Polish documentary film festival with very good reviews, and I think like the feedback, it's really it's good. And I'm really glad about it. And people want to know more, and I think the atmosphere right now, like my people in my age and younger from Poland I think they are interested in our heritage, and they're open for searching the historical aspects of Polish, of how to say it. Tal, please help me.
I think at least in Lublin, and as I said it before, this cultural institution, the Grodzka Gate and Theater Center, is funded by municipal money. So it tells you something about the approach of people. And of course, yeah, anti-Semitism exists everywhere, and you know it, and I don't need to repeat it. But the fact is that a lot of young people devote their lives to preserve the Jewish heritage in Poland, in Lublin specifically, but not only there. And I think this is something to know and to remember and to appreciate as well.
I mean, sort of, if I can just, duck in for a second, as Jan says, you tell stories as a filmmaker, right? And this one of the things that we are going to struggle with, and we, Deidre and I am sure, and everybody who works in the area of Holocaust education is deeply aware of the fact that we need ways of telling stories going forward, so that so that people understand the human cost and the human element, like Orly was saying, her story and her family story as well. And these sort of, as Deidre was saying to me, these material objects are the connection. They are ways that we will be able to transcend, to enter. Watching the movie for me was, I mean, my family is partly from Lublin, from the region around there as well, and I always imagine myself, this is the family that I don't have anymore. And to me, it is a deeply personal story, but it is important because it humanizes the narrative. It is not just, it makes people, young people particularly, also understand how we move forward and really teach and show that this is something imperative and immediate that we all need to be a part of for it to succeed. This learning about the Holocaust, learning about anti-Semitism, about intolerance and all these things. Anyway, I won't go on any further, but I really appreciate that. I think that these are wonderful. The film is wonderful, and obviously the questions that were raised there are illustrating sort of across the across the spectrum how important physical artifacts like this are. One last question, if I may, and then I'll be quiet. Can I just really quickly? It's really quickly. Has this been published at all?
What?
The photographs.
Yes, it has been published.
Okay.
I just want to add to what you said before. I think that if you want to learn about the Holocaust, you have to start understanding what you lost.
Mhm.
And this is for me what this collection does. When you look at those thousands of faces, you start kind of getting the sense of this huge loss.
Yeah.
And for me, this is the first step of learning about the Holocaust. Not
Thank-
understanding it,
I
because I
also
don't
want
think
to say that it was a really interesting movie. I enjoyed watching it. And I think, I don't know what kind of work you did on the photos, but they are so clear and the quality is so good. And it makes you really connect to these people, you know, you can just see them on the street, even, you know, in different clothes, but these are real people. And this tragedy, it happens to real people. It's not just a story, it's not just a myth, it happened. And again, project like this, it helps us remember and forward it to the next generation. They will understand those are real people, and it's great. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Thank you to all the panelists. It was really, really fascinating to hear your thoughts on this.
So thank you so much. I also personally appreciate so much that we've also told a story. We've told a story about the past. You've helped us understand this response in Lublin as well. What I appreciate about the photographs is I looked at them and I could see all the different ways this community lived and loved and worked. And you can't make them invisible objects. They're not just victims. They're not just numbers. They're people with stories. And I'm so grateful for that. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm so grateful to the Israel Embassy for supporting Holocaust scholarship and education, and also to the leadership of these two universities who signal the urgency of Holocaust education with their presence tonight with us. As a professor of Jewish studies who teaches about the history of the people of the book, I am struck by how scholarship is a powerful form of resistance. That resistance has been strengthened by this gift and by our coming together tonight. Thank you. Finally, for those who celebrate, tonight is the beginning of Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish holiday that celebrates nature and the birthday of the trees. Chag Sameach. Good night, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Toda rabba. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.